Hello and welcome to the Gaggle What We Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we've spoken now quite extensively about the big drive from Europe to try to prevent any kind of resolution of the war in Ukraine. Any attempt to bring peace is sabotage. We have these regular meetings of the coalition of the willing, that the purpose of which is to make sure that there is no peaceful outcome. That's why they're always recommending, hey, can we put in troops on the ground, and thereby guaranteeing that there'll be no.
Yeah, because the only thing in their mind that equates to peace is Russia's strategic defeat and breakup.
That's right. That's right. So that's exactly their goal, and that's why they're having these meetings. But now there's another front in the resistance to as a resolution that comes from the American deep state. We were always expecting this, that they would mount a strong attack on the Trump administration's attempts to bring the war to an end. And we had this in a long article in the New York Times that's appeared today, detailing the very extensive collaboration and partnership between the United States and Ukraine during the period of the special military operations. It started very early on, and it was extensive. It's not anything that should come as a surprise. I mean, we kind of knew that this was going on, but it's very interesting. They should come out now, and to present. Well, this is what America has been. You can't just walk away from what was really, from start to finish, an American project. We knew it was an American project, but that's really the thrust of this extraordinarily long article, that this is an American project.
This article could have come out in October of last year, but it didn't, did it?
That's right.
No, because they didn't want to embarrass the Biden administration because, oh, we're not part of this. We're not a combatant. Again, we're not involved in this. Okay. And then the same information that they wanted to protect one administration, they're using it against another administration. It's no coincidence this article drops in the first 100 days.
That's right.
When Trump has made it clear that he wants this conflict to come to an end, even though George and I have been highly skeptical, wondering if he knows how to do that. Okay. No. But it's no coincidence that it comes out now.
That's right. That's right. So let's just look at a few of the highlights. I mean, it's again.
So we're only going to have like 75 slides, right?
Not that many. Not that many. You'll be pleasantly surprised by how few slides. And here is the key. Here we are. The key takeaways. Key takeaways from America's secret military partnership with Ukraine. Again, it's not secret.
No.
This is highly misleading to present that this is secret. There was nothing secret about this. We all knew this. And investigate again, and I think what you said is very important, that with the Biden, if it was in October, then it would certainly have damaged Biden quite considerably had this come out in October, and the public would have known, hey, you haven't really revealed to us just how extensive this partnership was. You said you support Ukraine, but we didn't really know that you were actually fighting this war and using Ukraine. And we knew this, but I don't think the public knew this.
You'll have to forgive us, everyone. We do remember that Kamala Harris was the candidate, but she's so easy to forget. Okay, meaning the Biden Ukraine project. Obviously, exactly. Kamala Harris was running for on the Democratic ticket.
That's right. She's eminently forgettable, which works to her advantage, because then she can reappear in a couple of years and like a brand new person,
like a new shiny penny.
Exactly. So key takeaways, and there's an investigation by the New York Times has revealed that America was woven into the war far more than previously known.
Well, you lied to us about it before. Now you're telling
That's it.
you're revealing it now. Okay, that's
That's
what
right.
they're doing. That's
Of
what
course,
they're
you're
doing.
absolutely right. I mean,
Oh,
that's right. They lied to us. Well, we are not a party to the conflict. We're not a party to the conflict. Of course,
the
everyone.
administration said that. The organs, the military, the State Department, the
Right.
intelligence community, Congress, their pliant media, they all were lying, and
All of
now
it.
they're revealing it.
That's right. That's exactly. It says the war in Ukraine is at an inflection point. It's always Biden's favorite expression, with President Trump seeking rapprochement with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin and pressing for an end to the fighting. So they're framing it right. That's it. It's an inflection point, which means it's a really bad. This is a really bad thing.
Oh yeah, it can go either way. It could
Right.
go either. It's touchy,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Which is not. Again, they start out with lies.
That's
Okay.
right. But for nearly 3 years before Mr. Trump's return to power, the United States and Ukraine were joined in an extraordinary partnership of intelligence, strategy, planning, and technology, whose evolution and inner workings have been known only to a small circle of American and allied
Okay,
officials.
everyone. Okay, I'm going to take strong exception to the word partnership. The American intelligence community on these kind of projects do not have partners. They have vassals and servants.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And we did. I don't know. It was a year ago, a couple of years ago. Remember again a long and New York Times article about intelligence.
That's right.
About
About the 12 CIA bases.
yeah. That was exactly. Wow. I did not know that. And of course, the thrust of it was always, oh, this is really great. However, all these things that Ukraine does, like assassinations, well, America had nothing to do with that. They always came as a big surprise. Whoa. We never said you can go and assassinate. That was, but you never ended your relationship after these assassinations. You just sort of make sure that your fingers were clean, and therefore,
That's right. All the
no one
excesses.
can actually accuse you of being involved.
All the excesses were the Ukrainians.
That's right.
Because the CIA is a very virtuous group
It's
of
very
people.
virtuous. It never assassinates anyone. Never. Um, and then he says, here are 5 takeaways from the investigation. A U.S. base in Wiesbaden, Germany, supplied the Ukrainians with the coordinates of Russian forces on their soil. This is again. There's nothing unusual. Remember, the Russians have said this over and over again. They said there is no way Ukraine can launch these attacks on Russian soil without intelligence provided to them by the United States. The United States alone has the satellite technology to be able to provide this intelligence and to be able to guide the missiles. The missiles have to be guided very elaborately to avoid all the anti-missile weapon systems. Only the United States can do it. Ukrainians cannot do this. Russia said this over and over again. But apparently, whoa, this is a real shocker, what the New York Times has just exposed. The idea behind the partnership was that America's close cooperation with Ukraine would compensate for Russia's vast advantages in manpower and weaponry to guide the Ukrainians as they deployed their ever more sophisticated arsenal. The Americans created an operation called Task Force Dragon.
Not very imaginative name.
No. But again, if you ask, the idea behind was that America's close would compensate for Russia's. Why is America compensating in anything? I mean, why are you needing? If you're compensating, that means you are a party to the conflict. You can't just say, well, we're compensating, but we're not a party to the conflict. And then it says the secret center of the partnership was at the U.S. Army garrison in Wiesbaden. Each morning, U.S. and Ukrainian military officers set targeting priorities: Russian units, pieces of equipment, or infrastructure. American and coalition intelligence officers searched satellite imagery, radio emissions, and intercepted communications to find Russian positions. Task Force Dragon then gave the Ukrainians the coordinates so they could shoot at them. Again, they did.
Right. So the Americans They load the gun. Okay. They find the target and then they hand the gun to some Ukrainian, right?
Right, right. It's nonsense. Again, just shooting at them, that's not going to do it. You have to actually guide them. You have that, it's satellite guided weaponry because otherwise, there's you come across all of the elaborate anti-missile systems in Russia. So you have to actually guide it to avoid the anti-missile system. So they're doing far more than that, but they're trying to pretend, well, we just told them the coordinates. The shooting they did themselves.
With American weapons.
With yes, military officials worried that it might be unduly provocative to call the targets targets. Instead, they were referred to as points of interest. This is typical New York Times. We're supposed to take this nonsense seriously. Well, we're not going to call them targets because we're very worried about being provocative. Don't be provocative. Don't provoke. Let's
Yeah,
call
it's
them
if
points of interest.
a missile hitting a civilian target isn't provocative. Okay.
Right, right. Point. That's not a target. Not a target. No, no, definitely not. U.S. intelligence and artillery helped Ukraine quickly turn the tide against the Russian invasion. In the spring of 2022, the Biden administration agreed to send HIMARS, which use satellite-guided rockets for strikes up to 50 miles distance. So it's satellite-guided. In the war's first year, the Ukrainians were extremely dependent on the Americans for intelligence, and Task Force Dragon vetted and oversaw virtually every HIMARS strike. Vetted and oversaw virtually every HIMARS strike. The strikes caused Russian casualty rates to soar. And Ukraine's 2022 counteroffensive was largely successful. By December, the Ukrainians held an unlikely David versus Goliath upper hand against their Russian foe.
Well, that's open to interpretation, but anyway, fine.
And then the Biden administration kept moving its red lines. From the first, administration officials sought to lay down a red line. America was not fighting Russia, it was helping Ukraine. This is so stupid. It doesn't matter what you say. What do the Russians say? Well, I mean, just because we're not fighting Russia, we're helping Ukraine, as if you make these semantic arguments, they persuade anyone. Oh well, it was we're just helping Ukraine. We're killing Russians. It's our weapons are killing Russians. We're targeting Russians. We're using our satellite technology to kill Russians. But we're not fighting Russia. Oh, well, that's I'm very persuaded by that. Still, they worried that steps taken to accomplish that might provoke Mr. Putin to attack NATO targets or perhaps make good on his nuclear threats. Even as the administration developed an ever greater tolerance of risk to help Ukraine meet the evolving threat, many of the most potentially provocative steps were taken in secret. What does that mean, in secret? I don't. I mean, you mean they
Well,
didn't?
and also again, they want to present some kind of parity with the Americans and the Ukrainians. I don't buy that for a second. Okay, what kind of uh, discussions were they having? I don't think that the Ukrainians had much to do with this at all. They don't have the eyes and the ears. They don't have the technology. They don't
Right,
have the weapons.
right,
So why would anyone specializing in those areas say, "Well, what do you think,
right,
Ivan?" Okay,
right,
I mean, why would you?
right, right. No, no, of course not. It's the Americans who made that decision. Ukraine can't make these kinds of decisions. Those Americans who decided to do this, and this the extent of the commitment was made by the Americans. It wasn't Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine can ask for whatever it wants. That doesn't mean anything. It's the Americans who made this decision. And then easing a prohibition against American boots on Ukrainian ground, Wiesbaden was allowed to put about a dozen military advisors in Kiev. Oh, a dozen. Like this, a dozen. Okay, yeah, that's right. Just advisors. We're just here to give you advice. To avoid drawing public attention to their presence, the Pentagon initially called them subject matter experts. Later, this team was expanded to about 3 dozen. Huh. And the military advisors were eventually allowed to travel to Ukrainian command posts closer to the fighting. So that means they weren't exactly just advisors, giving advice. They were actually closer to the fighting. Now, what were they doing closer to the fighting? Well, we can, we don't have to imagine too hard.
I wonder how many of them were like Vinmans.
Exactly. Yeah. So the easing of prohibition again. You you're not a party to the conflict. Let's always remember, we're not a party to the conflict. And then in 2022, the US Navy was authorized to share targeting information for Ukrainian drone strikes on warships just beyond the territorial waters of Russian annexed Crimea. The CIA was allowed to support Ukrainian operations within Crimean waters. That fall, the spy agency covertly helped Ukrainian drones strike Russian warships in the port of Sevastopol. Again, this is nothing surprising. We've known about this. But again, it's interesting. They come out with it now, and they're doing it as if this is some shock revelation. I mean, the goal here is from the start to say, hey, this is American project. America is not just simply a distant observer. Not like Trump, I think, likes to present that America is some a disinterested mediator. I'm just trying to mediate. Well, I mean, it says, hey, America's not a disinterested mediator.
Well, I mean, that's such an interesting point, George, because he actually may believe that. Okay.
Maybe.
And that's why this article is being dropped. It's reminding him, no, this is your project, Mr. President. Yeah. Get with the program.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. In January 2024, US and Ukrainian military officers in Wiesbaden jointly planned a campaign using coalition-supplied long-range missiles along with Ukrainian drones to attack about 100 Russian military targets across Crimea. The campaign, named Operation Lunar Hail, largely succeeded in forcing the Russians to pull equipment, facilities, and forces in Crimea back to the Russian mainland. Ultimately, the US military and CIA were allowed to help with strikes into Russia. The hardest red line was the Russian border, but in spring 2024, to protect the northern city of Kharkov against Russian assault, the administration authorized the creation of an ops box, a zone of Russian territory within which US officers in Wiesbaden could provide the Ukrainians with precise coordinates. The box's first iteration extended across a wide swathe of Ukraine's northern border. The box was expanded after North Korea sent troops to help fight the Ukrainian incursion into Russia's Kursk region. The US military was later allowed to enable missile strikes in an area of southern Russia where the Russians staged forces and equipment for their offensive in eastern Ukraine. So again, you're looking at, this is quite serious stuff. The United States was essentially, I mean, we knew this, the United States was firing American weapons into Russian territory proper, just into Russian territory. So you're going way beyond even your own silly semantics where we're helping Ukraine, where you're actually attacking Russian territory. I'm not sure the United States would accept the idea that Russians can attack American territory and that's fine. We can just play these semantic games. Long-standing policy barred the CIA from providing intelligence on targets on Russian soil, but the CIA could request variances, carve-outs to support strikes for specific objectives. I always love this long-standing policy.
Oh yeah, just it's just dribble.
Okay. It's dribble. I agree. Intelligence had identified a vast munitions depot in Toropets, 290 miles north of the Ukrainian border. September the 18th, 2024, a swarm of drones slammed into the munitions depot. The blast, as powerful as a small earthquake, opened a crater the width of a football field. Later, the CIA was allowed to enable Ukrainian drone strikes in southern Russia to try to slow advances in eastern Ukraine. And then political disagreements in Ukraine contributed to the 2023 counteroffensive's collapse.
Political disagreements in Ukraine.
That's right.
I love how they're pitching this one.
Okay. Always. First of all, they distance themselves from anything that's embarrassing.
Yes.
That was a Ukrainian decision. We didn't have anything to do with that. And then,
even though we had a number of American officials, General Petraeus, it's a game changer. Victoria Nuland was saying all this other stuff. So New York Times. I mean, you're so shamelessly lying.
Of course. And then when something fails, well, that was the Ukrainians. They just didn't take our advice. We gave them good advice. They didn't take the advice. It failed because of them, not because of us. The 2023 counteroffensive was meant to build momentum after the first year's triumphs, but after the partners held war games in Wiesbaden and agreed on a strategy, the plan ran headlong into Ukrainian politics. So we had this fantastic plan, and then the Ukrainian politics got in the way.
Yeah, it's like a doctor having a magnificent procedure, but the patient died. Well, it was the patient because the procedure was perfect.
That's right, exactly. It was the patient's fault. The Ukrainian Armed Forces chief Zaluzhny embraced the plan, whose centerpiece was an assault in the direction of the southern city of Melitopol that would cut off Russian supply lines. But his rival and subordinate, Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, had his own plan to impale. He's the current defense. Yeah, that's right. To impale Russian forces in the occupied eastern city of Bakhmut.
Oh, going back to Bakhmut.
Exactly, yeah. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, sided with him and divided up the ammunition of forces between the two main fronts instead of one. The Ukrainians never did reclaim Bakhmut, and within months, the counteroffensive ended in failure. Russia now had the upper hand.
Okay, all of that, I would just, if I had a marker, I'd just cross it out. Whatever that's what you're selling me. I'm not buying it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is the I don't know, whatever it is, the million-word article, the partnership, the secret history of the war in Ukraine. This is the untold story. How's it untold? I mean, it's been told, I don't know how many times. The untold story of America's hidden role in Ukrainian military operations against Russia's invading armies. And then here you go. New York Times investigation reveals that America was woven into the war far more intimately and broadly than previously understood.
No, because you misreported it for the entire time. You carried water for the administration.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. But remember also all the New York Times stories about Nord Stream. America had nothing to do with that. No. It was all Ukrainians, with the hot babe. They hired a boat, put some explosives, and it had nothing to do with the Americans.
Left their passports behind.
Yeah. Then at critical moments, the partnership was the backbone of Ukrainian military operations.
When everything was going well.
Everything, exactly. That's right. That by U.S. counts have killed or wounded more than 700,000 Russian soldiers. Ukraine has put its casualty toll at 435,000. Notice how they frame it. They said, "Oh, this is the U.S. count." They quote the U.S. count for how many Russians were killed or wounded. Then they say, "Well, Ukraine has put its count." Well, where's the American count of how many Ukrainians were killed or wounded? Why? I mean, you should have a better idea of Ukrainian casualty numbers than of Russian casualty.
After all, it's a partnership.
It's a partnership. Well, Ukraine has put its casualty toll. Side by side in Wiesbaden's mission command center, American and Ukrainian officers planned Kiev's counteroffensive. A vast American intelligence collection effort both guided big picture battle strategy and funneled precise targeting information down to the Ukrainian soldiers in the field. One European intelligence chief recalled being taken aback to learn how deeply enmeshed his NATO counterparts had become in Ukrainian operations. They are part of the kill chain now, he said. The partnership's guiding idea was that this close cooperation might allow the Ukrainians to accomplish the unlikeliest of feats, to deliver the invading Russians a crushing blow.
So why do you say it was unlikely? You didn't think it was unlikely in February 2022, but it's unlikely in retrospect, right?
That's right. And in strike after successful strike, the first chapters of the war, enabled by Ukrainian bravery and dexterity, but also Russian incompetence, that underdog ambition increasingly seemed within reach. So again, they notice what they're doing. This is tooting the horn of the Biden administration. This is what a fantastic job the Biden people did. And again, they're presenting Trump as saying, "Hey, this is what America has been doing. Are you really going to walk away from that?" And that is going to be
the false binary. I always see this is so typical of Western thinking. Ukrainian bravery and dexterity and Russian incompetence. See how they always
of course,
never ending.
That's right. The partnership operated in the shadow of the deepest geopolitical fear that Mr. Putin might see it as breaching a red line of military engagement and make good on his often brandished nuclear threats.
Well, first of all, that is overstating the case. But why wouldn't the Russians do that? They're fighting NATO. They're fighting the United States.
Well, I think that's right. And then the question arises, well, if you knew that this was the risk you were running, why were you doing that? Why were you running this risk? Who gave you this right to take so many risks on behalf of the American people? That's not what the American people voted for. Essentially, a war, even a nuclear war with Russia on behalf of Ukraine. So the question is, well, why are you doing this? Putin. It's like, it's all somehow Putin is being unreasonable. He might see it as a breaching of a red line. Whereas
isn't it a red line?
Of course, it's a red line.
Of course, it's a red line. The question should be, why didn't the Russians do it? That's what it is.
Right.
I mean, this is so absurd. Right. All of this.
Right.
They're the ones that were playing with the nuclear threat, not Russia.
That's right. That's right. Because the reality is the Russians were the ones who were behaving reasonably with restraint, and that restraint was then exploited by the Americans to take greater and greater risks. So the Americans behaved irresponsibly. The Biden people behaved irresponsibly, assuming that this restraint would go on forever. The story of the partnership shows how close the Americans and their allies sometimes came to that red line. No, they didn't. They crossed that red line. How increasingly dire events forced them, some said too slowly, to advance it to more perilous ground, and how they carefully devised protocols to remain on the safe side of it.
What were the increasingly dire events? Did they? Yes. That's just like unspoken. Okay?
That's right. But it is true that there are these people, such as Victoria Nuland, who undoubtedly believed that America should be taking much greater risks. That may have led to her downfall. We don't know exactly the circumstance of why she resigned or was pushed out or whatever. But there were, without question, there were people within the government who wanted to go much further than America actually went. Time and again, the Biden administration authorized clandestine operations it had previously prohibited. American military advisors were dispatched to Kiev and later allowed to travel closer to the fighting.
Well, again, this has been the second time this has been mentioned. American military advisors were dispatched to Kiev and later allowed to travel closer to the fight. To what end?
It's exactly just sightseeing.
Why?
Yeah, just
you could do all this in Germany.
Yes. Yes, closer to the fighting. Um, Military and CIA officers in Wiesbaden helped plan and support a campaign of Ukrainian strikes in Russian annexed Crimea. And then finally, the military and the CIA received the green light to enable pinpoint strikes deep within Russia, inside Russia. And then this is the funny thing. In mid-April 2022, about 2 weeks before the Wiesbaden meeting, American and Ukrainian naval officers were on a routine intelligence sharing call when something unexpected popped up on their radar screens. According to a former senior US military officer, the Americans go, "Oh, that's the Moskva." The Ukrainians go, "Oh my God, thanks a lot, bye." The Moskva was the flagship of the Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The Ukrainians sank it. The sinking was a signal triumph, a display of Ukrainian skill and Russian ineptitude.
Oh,
But the
Russian, the Ukrainian skill?
Ukrainian, exactly,
Uh,
exactly,
uh, what's this article about then?
exactly. That's the thing. But that's it. You see, when they always have to say, "Well, we didn't have anything to do with that," because then he says, "For the Americans, there was anger because the
Okay, all
Ukrainians."
right. Look, everyone. Crimea is not on the moon. Okay, it would have been so easy, and probably was. Somebody called and said, "Hey, did you know that the Moskva is here?" Because everybody can see it. It's
Right.
not stealth.
That's right.
Okay, it's in broad daylight.
Right.
That little vignette that you just read, it's total rubbish. Everyone, it's like, oh, we didn't know the Moskva, a huge ship, was in Crimea. Oh my God, who knew?
Who
That's
knew?
where it was stationed.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's rubbish.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. It was there in
It was
plain sight.
there.
Yeah. But they say for the Americans, there was anger because the Ukrainians hadn't given so much as a heads up. Surprised that Ukraine possessed missiles capable of reaching the ship. Again, they knew exactly what Ukraine had, and it was there. It didn't require any greatly sophisticated and long-range missiles to do it. And panicked because the Biden administration hadn't intended to enable the Ukrainians to attack such a potent symbol of Russian power, and so on. So that's just some highlights from this New York Times um, article. This is without question. This is clearly an attack on Trump. I mean, this is a very long article. This drops and basically telling Trump, "Hey, America
Well,
is
wait.
up to its neck in this war."
So this is a sunk cost fallacy argument.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
If we just push just a little bit more. I mean, okay, this is getting stale. It's getting boring.
Right.
It's getting boring.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I agree with George. First of all, the timing of it should surprise no one. It is to absolve the Biden administration of anything. Okay.
Right.
Actually, they're doing the right thing. They're
That's,
out.
that's right.
Okay. And it's to attack the Trump administration for reassessing and maybe even just quitting.
Right.
That's why this came out. Okay. Anything that is bad that has happened, the Ukrainians did it. All the good things, the U.S. did it. Okay. I
Exactly.
mean, this is such a cookie cutter, approach.
That's right.
It's so shameful. I mean, secretive. No, none of this was secret. The New York Times knew about it. There's
Of
no
course
doubt
they did.
about that.
Of course they did. And they've written articles about this. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is brand new. I mean, it's like they keep doing this. The New York Times, you've written about this. You wrote a very, very long article about how basically the CIA created the Ukrainian intelligence operation. It was
From
so
scratch.
from scratch. But then you said, well, but they had nothing to do with the assassinations. That was them. We never signed off on that. So so they've already written about this. All of this has been known. All of this has been known. The Russians have repeated this, said that this is what everything the Ukrainians are doing is being done by the Americans. Everyone's known this, and now the New York Times drops this million-word article and pretending that they've done some fantastically original reporting. No one has really talked about this, just to show us how essentially this is America's war, and therefore America can't just simply walk away from it. It's our, it's our project, and the Ukrainians have been relying on us because we did all these great, wonderful things for them. Fantastic, like however many hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dead. Thank you, Mr. Biden.
I wonder if it's going to work. Okay. I mean, you can take a lot of stuff from this article. I haven't read the whole thing. I read the highlights. I will read it.
Right.
I have to. I'm obligated to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
But you can use this article in different directions. Okay. Obviously, this is being pitched to New York Times readers. Okay, that's no surprise. Most of them are supported the Biden Ukraine project, and very few people, particularly overeducated and useless people, like to admit that they're wrong. Okay, so they're going to say, "See, just a little bit more. Help out Zelensky just a little bit more. Don't treat him like that in the Oval Office." But it's not compelling, George. It's not compelling because why are Ukrainian officials saying that they don't have much time left? I mean, it could, begging for more money. That's always part of it. Okay, but it's not good. Okay, Steve Witkoff is, he. Do you think he really cares about Russians and Ukrainians? I don't think he
No, I
really
don't.
does.
I don't think so. But it's clearly. I mean, it's like the Europeans and the Pentagon, the CIA. I mean, they're basically they're all there. No one has been removed. So everyone who was there during the years of this war, they will still have their jobs. Then they know far more about this war than do the Trump people who are nominally in charge, which is why it's called a deep state. The bureaucracy knows exactly what's been going on, and they have the tools. They have the reporters, and they talk to the reporters, and they leak all this stuff. So it becomes their job is to keep this war going. They will not let this go. They're absolutely determined to keep this war going, just like the Europeans, Starmer and Macron and the rest of them. They want to keep this war going. And we have Trump who comes in saying, "Well, I'm going to end this," but he really doesn't know how. But even more important, he doesn't have the tools. He's got this team around him, and even as we've seen from Mike Waltz, it's questionable whether to what extent he's even on board with
Well,
the
I have to
Trump
wonder.
agenda. But that team can't actually get to get to where it wants to without taking huge risks. And I'm not at all sure the
Well,
Trump
if
has to
that
do it.
signal exchange tells us anything, these people are way out of their depth,
Yeah.
way out. Okay, I have to wonder, George. Maybe you know a little bit of what's going on the calendar, but have you heard any talk of a new appropriation for Ukraine?
I haven't heard that. No.
I wonder if there's some kind of timing here going on.
Right.
Okay, because everything that George said about no one being fired, being removed from their position that led this ridiculous project, in my opinion. Those are all they have. Those are powerful assets, but money talks. It doesn't scream. The great philosopher Bob Dylan said that, and that's going to be that's important. I mean,
Right.
you can talk all you want and complain all you want, involve yourself in all kinds of machinations, but if the money isn't there, it's not there. So
But I mean, obviously that is an important consideration. But Trump pledged. He did pledge after the meeting in Jeddah that the money spigot will once again be open
well
for
then,
Ukraine, which is kind
David
of why
George, would
why
you?
the third
All
DC.
right, I have a phrase for everybody. George, you can use it all you want. We're doing the prehistory of the post failure.
Right, right, right. Well, but that's why you know it's going to be very hard to end this. Even with the best will in the world, if you've got so much resistance, I mean, we've seen what the Europeans are absolutely determined to keep this war going, but I have a political military establishment
Yeah.
that is determined to keep this war
Well,
going.
I'm not so concerned about the Europeans. As a matter of fact, their behavior is more in the category of just pathetic comedy. I do take very seriously the machinations that the New York Times article is trying to stir up. This is a shot across the bow,
Right,
everyone.
right.
Make no mistake. Make no mistake.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I think it's it's clear that that they want to keep this going, and they were really giving a warning to Trump that, hey, just don't go there, don't try to do it. And we know from the first Trump term is that he kind of wanted to do a lot of things which were right. Those were the right things that he wanted to do. He would withdraw from Syria, he wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan, but they never really materialized because of the opposition within the bureaucracy. And I think something like this is happening now. So we have, on the one hand, the various Trump peace initiatives that aren't really getting very far. And then you've got this resistance within the bureaucracy. And what I think is most likely to happen is that they will persuade Trump, which is, it's Russia. Russia is the problem. This is, that's they're behind everything. That's why your wonderful peace initiatives are not working. Russia is
Well, no, I mean
your wonderful
it's
plans.
it's far worse than that. I think it's far, far worse than that because the argument these people are going to make with Trump is that, of course, Mr. President, you want to have a good relationship with Russia. It is absolutely necessary after everything that has happened. That's why we need regime change. We need a regime change where they're more. They think in terms of partnership with the United States, which means servitude. Okay, that's what they're going to do, George. They're going to say it's the regime type. That's the problem. It's not Russia. We don't have anything to do with the Russians, for goodness sake. It's regime change. We have regime change, and then everything takes care of itself. Yeah. That's what they're going to try to convince them of.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think all of that is very likely. As things stand, I mean, it's hard to see how there's going to be any progress at all. I mean, and while the various people like Marco Rubio and others are talking in terms of, we're making progress, it's hard to see how any progress is really being maintained. And therefore, it's the line of easy, the least resistance. Keep doing what we were doing before. I mean, that's just there's no point in going overboard with your various peace plans because they're not really getting anywhere. So do what we did. And with Trump, he's going to do more than that because then Trump will say, well, I'm not going to do what Biden did. I'm going to escalate. And I think that's always been the danger, that Trump will be tempted to escalate, to go beyond what Biden did.
Well, one of the biggest mistakes one can make is putting deadlines and pursuing predictions. Well, Easter's what, April 20th?
I think it's April 20th. Yeah.
Coming up.
Right. Yeah.
Coming up. Yeah. Okay. Solve it in one day. Do it in, what was it? Was it mentioned 3 months? I think it was one day, 3 months, Easter.
Yeah, and it's now, what is it? I think 5 months since he won the election. So already it's getting towards 5 months since he won the election. So he was going to get it done before taking the oath of office. So that's he's a long way from that. So no, I think this New York Times article of it's very interesting. It drops there. I think the Biden people, all the sort of the Democratic Party establishment, the national security establishment, will be well pleased with themselves. And will in some ways condemn Trump for trying to walk away from this.
But see, when the cynicism chart, or gauge goes haywire at this point, because essentially everyone, the people that are against Trump's initiatives, as vague as they are, George and I have obviously been highly critical, but what they want is they want this to be Trump's war. They want it to be an endless war, and they want Trump to drown in it. Okay, because they're not going to do that for Palestine. No, 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 no. Can't do that. Can't do it, because that's just the ultimate third rail. But not Ukraine. Okay, and this is where they're going to try to drown Trump in his agenda. And you know what? They might succeed.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because this is a vulnerability. That ridiculous signal episode. That's blood in the water. That's blood in the water. And no. What I'm just saying is the incompetence. No expertise here. I mean, all right. Biden. He wasn't always there, but he was present when it came to the most important thing. Watch, they're going to do this.
Yeah, no, I think they will. I think that and they will play on Trump's vanity. I don't think he likes the idea of being incompetent. I think that's on the other hand. I mean, I do think that the signal story, I think it's a storm in a teacup. I don't think it's going to go very far.
Don't misunderstand. I agree with you, but it's good. It is a cudgel. That's what I'm saying. What it will be used for. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's comical. It's not important. Okay, there are so many other important issues involved here, but I'm saying this is the way they seize. Right. Okay, or what is it? They pounce is the word.
Pounce. they pounce. But as time moves on, I mean, they obviously there's going to be greater and greater pressure on Trump. Hey, you made all these promises, and that you're going to get this done. And Trump's people are all saying, well, everything is going hunky-dory, and everything's moving along, and he's making great progress and everything. And at some point, people are going to realize, well, actually, you're making very little progress. And that's going to be the key moment when Trump is going to have to make some serious decisions. And I suspect, like these articles, they're going to make the decision for him.
For him. Absolutely right. Nothing like this happens by accident, I'm the people that worked on it called the editor. I think we're ready. We're ready to print. No, I mean the people behind this article, which there were many, they were told what day to be ready and it will be dropped. Okay. But George, just the snippets that we looked at that you presented us in your slideshow, how the gray lady has descended into just garbage. It's not even good writing. There's no coherent logic attached to it. Maybe I remember differently, but I remember I read the New York Times with a bit of respect 25, 30 years ago. Maybe I was wrong.
I think, yeah, sure. It was never a great newspaper, to be honest. I mean, it's worse now, obviously, than it was, but it was never really a very good newspaper. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We'll see where this goes. I'll be very curious. I guess the Sunday shows.
Yeah, the Sunday, obviously.
It'll be the Sunday show. So George and I, as we are wont to do, because we have the time zone advantage.
Yes.
We set the agenda, and everybody else follows.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
Because we're the first. We're always the first.
That's
okay.
Exactly. They go straight to the gaggle to find out what the talking points of the rest of the day are.
Speaking of which, I was just reminded before we started, Apple wanted a one-on-one, a Four Eyes, and he's asked me, "Do you guys ever talk about the tip jar?" And George, I'm presenting this question to you.
It's a very good question, and I think Apple is really raising the salient issues, which is the tip jar is the most important thing. I mean, all the rest, none of that matters. The situation with the tip jar is really important because that's what allows Apple to live the life that he feels he's
He
entitled to.
expects. He
Yes,
expects.
yeah, exactly, that he's entitled. So that's a very important question, the tip jar. So if you have anything, lying around in your bank account, just take it all out straight into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the, the more we can improve for
Look,
look at that. That's
these things, these are not cheap. Okay, these are
exactly.
not
It's not
cheap.
cheap. He needs that tip jar filled up because he's not going to go without. I'm not going without those sausages. Don't forget, 10 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for our live stream. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.